I recently faced a parent's worst nightmare. The HOA president had my son snatched off our sidewalk, zip-tied, and shoved into an SUV. Her reason? She called it a community safety detention. Funny thing is, the only thing tested that night was my self-control to not knock her out. But let me start from the beginning. My name is Marcus Dawson. I'm a software architect, a man who deals in logic, in systems where every action has a predictable reaction. My life is built on clean code and quiet evenings with my wife, Carla, and our son, Ethan. Carla is the district attorney. She's the one who deals with the messy, unpredictable parts of the world. I'm the calm one, the steady hand. At least that's what I tell myself. But under the calm, there's always a storm waiting for the right conditions to form. Today it made landfall. It started with a notification on my phone, a simple automated alert from the family tracking app. Ethan's phone tracking had been disabled. I stared at the message, a cold wire of dread tightening in my gut. He was supposed to be walking home from robotics club. A straight shot, 15 minutes tops. He always left his tracking on. It was our deal. I called his phone. It went straight to voicemail. That's when the second notification arrived. This one was from Carla. A single, gut-punching text. Call me. 911. I was in the garage trying to coax an old lawnmower back to life. The smell of gasoline and cut grass filled the air. Now all I could smell was burnt wire panic. I dialed her number, my thumb shaking so badly I had to try twice. She picked up on the first ring, her voice, usually so measured and confident, the voice that could command a courtroom, was thin and brittle. Marcus, she said. Neighbor Joe just called. His security camera caught it. A black SUV. No plates, 2 men. They grabbed Ethan. The world tilted on its axis. The lawnmower, the garage, the quiet suburban afternoon. It all just dissolved into a roaring white noise in my ears. Grabbed him. The words didn't compute. This is our community. A gated enclave of manicured lawns and faux Tuscan homes. It's supposed to be safe. That's why we pay the ridiculous HOA fees. That's why we put up with her. Karen Tegan. The name left a bitter taste on my tongue, like old coffee grounds. Karen was our HOA president, a woman who wielded her clipboard like a scepter and the neighborhood bylaws like scripture. She was a failed police academy cadet, washed out for psychological inflexibility, a fact she spun into a heroic tale of standing against a corrupt system. Now, she ran our little corner of manicured lawns and identical mailboxes like her personal fiefdom. The 2 men Carla had seen, the ones in the community enforcement vests, were her personal goon squad. I'd seen them before, hassling kids for skateboarding on the sidewalk or measuring lawn heights with a tape measure. They were unlicensed, untrained security contractors who looked more like bouncers than peacekeepers, the blunt instruments of her will. The connection clicked into place with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. Last week, Karen had cornered me by the community mailbox, her shadow falling over me like a bird of prey. Her son, Kevin, a shy, anxious boy a year younger than Ethan, had apparently told her that Ethan was bullying him. She'd accused my son of psychological harassment and social terrorism, terms she'd clearly lifted from a bad television drama. I knew it was a lie. Ethan was the kind of kid who'd build a ramp for a family of ducks to get out of a storm drain. Just last month, I'd found him in the garage, carefully gluing a splint onto the wing of a stunned sparrow. He was a helper, a builder, not a bully. I had defended him calmly, my voice even, telling Karen there must be a misunderstanding. Ethan had mentioned helping Kevin with a coding project for school, showing him how to debug a line of Python. That was all. Karen's eyes, small and hard like ball bearings, had narrowed. There is no misunderstanding, Mr. Dawson, she had hissed, her voice a low, venomous whisper. There are predators in this community, and I will root them out. I have a zero-tolerance policy. I had dismissed it as her usual brand of unhinged melodrama. I was wrong. It wasn't melodrama. It was a threat. She had greenlit this. This rogue queen, this petty dictator of the cul-de-sac, had ordered a kidnapping. My son. Her men had put their hands on my son. The calm, reasonable voice I used to navigate the world vanished, consumed by a raging storm. I dropped the wrench I was holding. It clattered on the concrete floor, a sharp, metallic sound that echoed the snapping of my last nerve. "Where are you?" I asked Carla, my voice a low growl I didn't recognize. "5 minutes out," she said, her own voice tight with suppressed panic. "Don't do anything, Mark. Stay put." But I couldn't stay put. The animal part of my brain, the ancient primal part that exists only to protect my child, was now in complete control. The garage, my sanctuary of logic and order, suddenly felt like a cage. They had taken our son, and in doing so, they had just declared war on a man they knew nothing about. They saw a software engineer who fixed his own lawnmower. They had no idea who they had just awakened. The sound of screeching tires on asphalt ripped through the quiet suburban air. Carla's sleek sedan, a machine she normally drove with meticulous precision, fishtailed into our driveway, its front bumper inches from the garage door. She was out before the engine was off. The driver's door left agape like a silent scream. Her phone was already pressed to her ear, her district attorney face firmly in place. A mask of controlled, professional fury I knew all too well. But it was a mask. I could see the tremor in the hand that held the phone, the slight, almost imperceptible quiver in her jaw. The mask was for the world. The fear was for me, for us. "I'm on with dispatch," she clipped, her words short and sharp, each one a perfectly aimed dart. "They're putting out a bolo for a black SUV, no plates." "But Marcus?" She looked at me then, and the mask slipped, her eyes wide with the same terror that was clawing at my own throat. "These guys are ghosts. The vehicle is likely unregistered, probably stolen. They'll be using burner phones. They're professionals in their own thuggish way." A primal urge, hot and undeniable, surged through me. My knees wanted to sprint, to run blindly in the direction they'd taken him, to tear the world apart with my bare hands until I found him. But Carla's hand shot out, grabbing my arm. Her grip was like steel. "No," she commanded, her voice dropping to a low, intense register. "You don't run at shadows, Marcus. You don't charge into the dark. You find a light, and you make them come to you. Open the watch app. Now." She was right. Of course she was right. Raging was a luxury. Action was a necessity. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Joe, our neighbor from across the street. "Got something. Video." A moment later, a grainy file appeared. My heart hammered against my ribs as I opened it. There it was, captured in the indifferent, low-resolution gaze of his security camera. My lanky, sweet boy, his face a mask of confusion and fear, being manhandled by 2 burly men. They moved with a practiced, brutal efficiency, zip-tying his hands behind his back and shoving him into the back of the SUV. He was so stunned he didn't even fight back. He just stumbled, a puppet with its strings cut. A wave of nausea, hot and acidic, washed over me. I felt the world tilt on its axis. "His tracker," Carla said, her mind already 3 steps ahead, her voice pulling me back from the brink. "I know it's off," I replied, the words tasting like ash. "His phone is probably dead or disabled. They'd have found it and crushed it." "Fine, his watch," she countered, her focus absolute. "That cellular watch you got him for his birthday. It has its own GPS chip, its own cellular connection. The smaller, harder to find, harder to disable. They might have missed it." Of course, the watch. The one he'd complained was too bulky. The one I'd insisted he wear for emergencies. This was the emergency. I fumbled with my own phone, my fingers feeling thick and clumsy, my brain struggling to execute the simplest of commands. I swiped past apps, my thumb shaking until I found it. The secondary tracking app, the one linked directly to the watch's emergency beacon. The screen loaded with agonizing slowness, a spinning wheel, a new form of torture. And then it appeared, a tiny blue dot, pulsing on a map of our town. It was moving. It was moving away from the main roads, towards the old, forgotten part of the development near the lake, where the original, derelict clubhouse stood. a monument to a failed real estate dream from decades ago. It was Karen's private kingdom, a place no one ever went, a place she used for HOA storage and, apparently, darker things. "I've got him," I breathed, the words a prayer of relief and terror. I showed Carla the screen. "He's at the old Northwood Clubhouse." Carla didn't hesitate. She was already back in the car, the engine roaring to life. "Get in." As I slid into the passenger seat, the world a blur of motion, my phone buzzed again. It was Joe calling this time. I answered, putting him on speaker. "Marcus," he whispered, his voice strained and urgent. I didn't want to say anything with the police listening, you know? But I know those goons. I've seen them around. They're part of Karen's crew. They do odd jobs for her, enforcement stuff. They store their equipment at that old clubhouse. Lawn mowers, tools, and their van. The confirmation sent a surge of ice-cold adrenaline through me, sharpening my senses, focusing my rage into a single, deadly point. This wasn't random. This was a direct, calculated attack. Carla drove with a terrifying, focused calm, her hands steady on the wheel, her eyes fixed on the road. The city lights gave way to the darker, winding roads that led to the lake. She wasn't calling the local police. I knew why. Our town's police force had a security contracting side business, and one of their biggest clients was Karen Tegan and the Northwood HOA. They were compromised, bought, and paid for. Instead, Carla was on her private cell, her voice a low, authoritative hum that I'd seen her use to dismantle hostile witnesses on the stand. "Judge Morrison, please. It's Carla Dawson. I have an emergency." A pause. "Yes, I know what time it is, Frank. I have a credible kidnapping in progress. My son." Her voice never wavered, but I saw her knuckles turn white as she gripped the phone. She was securing an emergency telephonic warrant, not for the local PD, but for a full tactical team from the county sheriff's department, a force outside Karen's sphere of influence. My wife wasn't just a mother anymore. She was a weapon, a precision-guided missile aimed squarely at Karen Tegan's heart. We turned onto Old Lake Road, the car's headlights cutting a swath through the oppressive darkness. The old clubhouse loomed ahead, a dark, hulking shape against the twilight sky, its windows like vacant eyes. And there, parked right next to a single bare bulb that cast a sickly yellow glow over a side entrance, was a black SUV with no plates. "They're here," I whispered, the sound swallowed by the sudden silence as Carla killed the engine. She hung up the phone. "The warrant is signed," she said, her voice like steel. "The sheriff's ERT is 10 minutes out. We are not going in there alone, Marcus. Do you understand me? We wait." "Carla, he's in there," I argued, my voice a raw plea. The animal in my brain was screaming, clawing at the inside of my skull, demanding I storm the building. "I know," she said, turning to face me, her eyes boring into mine. "And if we go in half-cocked, we could get him killed. These are not reasonable people. They are cornered animals. We wait for the professionals. We do this by the book, my book, and we bring him home safe." Her logic was a cold, hard wall against my burning rage. She was right, but 10 minutes felt like a lifetime. 10 minutes while my son was in that building with those men. Every second that ticked by was a new agony. We sat in the darkness, the only sounds the chirping of crickets and the frantic, desperate beating of my own heart. The 10 minutes we were told to wait stretched into an eternity, each second a tiny, sharp-edged stone pressing into my soul. We sat in the profound darkness of the car, the engine off, the world outside reduced to the chirping of crickets and the rustle of unseen things in the tall grass lining the road. The old clubhouse was a black hole against the star-dusted sky, a void that had swallowed my son. My hands clenched and unclenched in my lap, my knuckles aching. I wanted to tear the door off that building. I wanted to scream until my lungs bled. Every fiber of my being strained against the cold, hard logic of Carla's command to wait. She sat perfectly still in the driver's seat, a statue carved from ice and fury. Her breathing was even, her gaze fixed on the single, sickly yellow light illuminating the side door of the clubhouse. She was a coiled spring, a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She was in her element, and I had never loved her more or been more terrified for us. My phone, clutched in my sweaty palm, suddenly vibrated, the buzz unnaturally loud in the silence. An email notification lit up the screen, the subject line a jolt to my system. Emergency HOA board meeting. Urgent matter of community security. The sender was Karen Tegan. The meeting was scheduled for right now. A cold dread, colder than the fear I was already feeling, washed over me. She was broadcasting from inside that building with my son. The sheer, unmitigated audacity of it was breathtaking. It was the act of a tyrant so convinced of her own righteousness that she couldn't see the abyss yawning at her feet. She's insane, I whispered, showing the phone to Carla. She's holding a board meeting. A flicker of something that might have been a grim smile touched Carla's lips. Good, she murmured. Let her talk. Let her hang herself with her own words. My fingers trembled as I tapped the link to join the virtual meeting. The screen resolved into the familiar grid of faces. And there, filling the center square, was Karen. She was in a drab, cinderblock room, a single bare bulb hanging overhead. Her face was flushed, her eyes lit with a manic, triumphant power as she lectured the other board members. Frank Henderson, a retired accountant who always looked perpetually bewildered, was frowning. A woman named Brenda, who sold essential oils and believed everything Karen said, was nodding along with rapt attention. And therefore, the temporary detainment of the subject was a necessary and proportional response to a credible threat. Karen was saying, her voice sharp and self-assured. Our community enforcement officers acted with exemplary professionalism. The subject is secure and will be held until I can personally certify a corrective action plan with his guardians. You mean a kid, Karen? Frank Henderson finally piped up, his voice thin but determined. You're not talking about a subject. You're talking about Ethan Dawson. He's a child. Karen's eyes narrowed into slits. Words matter. Frank? She retorted, her tone dripping with condescension. He is a subject presenting an ongoing behavioral risk to the community's well-being. We have a zero-tolerance policy for a reason. Beside me, Carla whispered, Perfect. She just confessed to false imprisonment in front of witnesses. Her voice was a thread of pure steel. She just made our case. I fumbled for the screen record button, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I was capturing it all, the madness, the hubris, the confession. Just then, a new sound began to intrude on the night. A low, deep thrumming, more felt than heard at first, that grew steadily, insistently louder. It was the sound of heavy-duty engines, of power and purpose. I looked out the windshield and saw them. A column of black, armored trucks and patrol cruisers, their forms ghost-like in the gloom, glided down the road toward us. They moved with a silent, deadly grace, killing their lights as they approached, their presence an overwhelming wave of authority that washed away the crickets and the rustling leaves. The cavalry was here. Doors opened and closed with soft, metallic clicks. Figures clad in black tactical gear emerged, moving with a fluid efficiency that spoke of endless training. They were shadows with rifles, specters of controlled violence. A man detached himself from the group and walked toward our car. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his face a mask of calm professionalism. A patch on his vest read Miller. Sergeant Miller, the commander of the sheriff's emergency response team. Carla got out of the car, and I followed, my legs feeling unsteady. She met him halfway, calm and precise, every inch the district attorney. She handed him a tablet displaying the signed warrant. Sergeant, she said, her voice clear and steady. The primary subject, Karen Tegan, is inside. She is currently broadcasting a video conference from a room within the building. My son, Ethan Dawson, a minor, is being held against his will on the premises. He is the priority. His safety is paramount. Miller nodded, his eyes scanning the building. Understood, Mom. He turned to his team, his voice a low, commanding rumble that cut through the night. We have a confirmed hostage situation. Juvenile male. The primary subject is armed with at least 2 associates, presumed armed. Standard breach protocol. We go on my command. He raised a bullhorn to his lips, and a sudden, jarringly loud voice erupted from it, shattering the night. This is the county sheriff's department. We have a warrant to search this facility. Karen Tegan, you are ordered to exit the building with your hands in the air. On my phone screen, I saw Karen's head jerk up, her face a mask of disbelief, which quickly morphed into incandescent fury. It appears we are being subjected to an unlawful intrusion by an overreaching government entity, she announced to the stunned faces on the board meeting. Do not be alarmed. I have this under control. The side door of the clubhouse flew open with a bang, and her 2 goons stepped out into the yellow light. They were big men, made bigger by their tactical vests, but they moved with an uncertainty that betrayed their amateur status. They were carrying what looked like rifles, but I could see now they were pepper ball launchers, glorified paintball guns. You are trespassing on private property, one of them yelled, his voice cracking with a mixture of fear and bravado. Put the weapons down. Sergeant Miller boomed back through the bullhorn, the command echoing off the trees. On the ground now. From inside the building, amplified by the open door, we heard Karen's shriek. Do not stand down. Defend our property. Use of force is authorized. It was the stupidest, most arrogant mistake they could have made. In the split second after her command, a deputy near the front of the stack raised his launcher. There was a soft thump, and a canister arced through the air. A flashbang grenade. It exploded with a blinding white light and a deafening concussion that ripped through the air. A physical blow of sound and light. The 2 goons crumpled to the ground, hands clapped over their ears, completely disoriented. In seconds, deputies were on them, cuffing them with a brutal, practiced efficiency. Breach! 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 The call went out and the team moved. A battering ram, wielded by 2 massive deputies, slammed against the side door. The wood splintered. A second slam and the door flew inward. The deputies flooded into the building, a black tide of overwhelming force. On my phone screen, I saw Karen's head jerk up, her face a mask of disbelief, which quickly morphed into incandescent fury. It appears we are being subjected to an unlawful intrusion by an overreaching government entity, she announced to the stunned faces on the board meeting. Do not be alarmed. I have this under control. The side door of the clubhouse flew open with a bang, and her 2 goons stepped out into the yellow light. They were big men, made bigger by their tactical vests, but they moved with an uncertainty that betrayed their amateur status. They were carrying what looked like rifles, but I could see now they were pepper ball launchers, glorified paintball guns. You are trespassing on private property, one of them yelled, his voice cracking with a mixture of fear and bravado. Put the weapons down. Sergeant Miller boomed back through the bullhorn, the command echoing off the trees. On the ground now. From inside the building, amplified by the open door, we heard Karen's shriek. Do not stand down. Defend our property. Use of force is authorized. It was the stupidest, most arrogant mistake they could have made. In the split second after her command, a deputy near the front of the stack raised his launcher. There was a soft thump, and a canister arced through the air. A flashbang grenade. It exploded with a blinding white light and a deafening concussion that ripped through the air. A physical blow of sound and light. The 2 goons crumpled to the ground, hands clapped over their ears, completely disoriented. In seconds, deputies were on them, cuffing them with a brutal, practiced efficiency. Breach! 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 The call went out and the team moved. A battering ram, wielded by 2 massive deputies, slammed against the side door. The wood splintered. A second slam and the door flew inward. The deputies flooded into the building, a black tide of overwhelming force. And then I saw him, flanked by 2 deputies. My son, Ethan, walked out into the night. His face was pale, his eyes wide, but he was walking. He was whole. He saw me, and his face crumpled. Dad! I ran to him, and he ran to me, and I swept him up in a hug that felt like it could mend the universe. He buried his face in my shoulder, his small body shaking with sobs of relief. Carla joined us, her arms wrapping around both of us, her own tears finally falling freely. We stood there for a long time, a shattered family piecing itself back together in the flashing red and blue lights, the sounds of the night slowly returning to normal. He was safe. That was all that mattered. A moment later, a deputy walked out of the building, and beside him, looking small and overwhelmed, was Ethan, my son. We ran to him, ignoring the deputies, and I wrapped my arms around him so tight I could feel his heart beating against my chest. As we held him, two deputies half-dragged a screaming Karen Tegan out into the night. "You can't do this," she shrieked. "I am the president of this association. I was protecting my community." Her wild, frantic eyes landed on us. "This is corruption. She's using her office to protect her criminal son." "Karen Tegan," Sergeant Miller said, his voice cutting through her tirade. "You're under arrest for kidnapping, false imprisonment, and conspiracy." As they pushed her into the back of a patrol car, she let out one last desperate cry. "I was saving you all. I was keeping you safe." The door slammed shut, cutting her off. Her reign was over. The next day, an investigation of the clubhouse revealed a command center filled with surveillance equipment and meticulously organized files on nearly every family in the community. A stalker's diary masquerading as official records. Financials on her computer proved widespread embezzlement. She had used HOA funds to buy illegal gear and fund her private army. The final nail in her coffin came from her own son, Kevin. He confessed to the school counselor that Ethan hadn't bullied him at all. In fact, Ethan had been protecting him from other bullies. Karen had twisted a budding friendship into a sinister narrative to fit her paranoid worldview. At Karen Tegan's arraignment, the judge read the staggering list of charges: kidnapping, racketeering, felony theft, illegal surveillance, and denied bail. Karen finally broke, screaming about rules and chaos as bailiffs dragged her from the courtroom. The weeks that followed were strange. The HOA imploded, but the real battle was helping Ethan heal. A month later, he was asked to speak at a school assembly on safety. Standing under the lights, he looked small, but his voice was strong. "She got away with it because people were scared to question her," he told the crowd. "She used big words and fake rules. Our community is a system. The rules should protect everyone, not just give power to one person. Know the rules. Know your rights. That's how we stop this from happening again." The room erupted in applause. Karen had tried to make an example of my son. She did, just not the one she wanted. She showed a whole town what happens when power goes unchecked. He showed them something stronger. The storm passed. The damage was real, but my son was still here. Steadier, louder, and somehow bigger than before.